Hey, fifth grade. It's good to see you all again. Well, I can't see you, but you can see me, hopefully. I've been thinking a lot about you guys. I really miss you. I'm sad that this is how our year ended, but I know that you're being resilient, and I'm proud of you. Um, we're going to get started on another lesson of online learning. This week we are talking about animals, and we learned some of the body systems that animals and humans share that help them to survive in their environments. And then we also are diving into learned behaviors and adaptations a little bit more. I encourage you, if you haven't yet, go back to last week's videos and watch the ones about learned behaviors versus inherited behaviors and inherited traits. Both of those will help you with your understanding of today's topic, which is natural selection. Before we begin our lesson, you need to get a pencil, a piece of paper, and somebody or something to talk with to get your ideas out there. So pause the video, go grab that now. Cool, welcome back. Like I said, today's topic is natural selection. It's something that we talked a little bit about in class, well, a lot about, but it's still something that some of us are kind of struggling with. So we're going to go over it again. Our essential question is, do living organisms change over time? So do things that are living change over time? Our objective, by the end of this lesson, you will be able to define natural selection and explain the relationships between adaptations and natural selection. That's why it's important that you remember what adaptations are from last week. So define, be able to tell somebody what is natural selection, and then explain the relationship between adaptations and natural selection. All right, so here we go. We're going to start off by looking at this interesting picture. I'm going to move my face so that you can see it better. I know you like to see my face right there, but what do you notice and wonder about this picture? So I want you to take a second. Don't say anything yet. Just observe like a scientist. What do you notice and wonder about this picture? Great, so let's start off with notices. Tell your partner or your animal something that you noticed, and then tell them what you wonder. My thinking goes like this. I noticed that over here on one side, it seems to be maybe like a monkey type figure. They're walking on 2 feet, but they've got kind of hands that look good for climbing. Over time, the next one is more of like an ape or a gorilla, standing up taller, getting bigger, standing up taller. This one looks like someone's got like a stick or knife. Again, a little bit taller, more human-like. I noticed that it's got some sort of tool, and this one looks really similar to a human you might see today. So I noticed that it's almost like a progression, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. What I wonder about this picture is, how are these images related? Is it of the same animal or species? Is it different animals and species? Is this like a quick change? Is it a parade? Hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a better idea of what's actually going on here. All right, so for our Explorer, I'll move me over here now. Just move around the teacher. You're going to explore how natural selection changes a group of mice. Before we start, let's review some important vocabulary. Adaptation, that's a physical or behavioral trait that positively impacts an organism in its environment. We talked about these last week. Adaptations are things that are physical, like part of the body, or behaviors that help an organism survive in its environment. Things like camouflage, having a long neck, eating trash out of a garbage can. Those are all adaptations. Another key word is environment, the surrounding in which an organism lives. We talked a little bit about ecosystems, the first video. That's for next week. Whoops. It's a sneak peek of what's coming. The environment is the surroundings in which an organism lives. So your environment right now is hopefully your home, or maybe your grandparents' home, whoever you're with right now. It can be like a kitchen, living room. But an animal's environment might be the woods or the beach, a forest or your house, those kind of things. All right, so you're going to change the environmental factors to alter the ability of predators to hunt their prey. Follow the directions on the website. This is a model that we have kind of seen before if you were in my class when we learned about those mice changing colors when there was a volcano. So here we go. Click on the link. I'll also put the link in the comments of the YouTube video, so it's easier to get to if you don't want to open up the slides. That's totally fine. 100%. All right. Seasons can often determine the fitness of a particular animal. When we talk about fitness, we're not talking about like strong, like Mr. Crone. Can you tell I've been working out? It's talking about how well the animal can survive in its environment. So looking over here, you can see some different animals in an environment. Drag the red point across the sky to change the climate. When we talk about climate, we're not talking about like one rainstorm or one cold day. We're talking about how a place is over a long period of time. So think about how this change will affect the ability of predators to hunt mice. So here's the red dot. We're going to change the climate. Snowy. Interesting. Right now you should see a big difference. I'll put them like side by side. Maybe you can do it too. How would this change affect the ability of predators to hunt mice? Hopefully you're thinking about that. To me, it seems like when there's dirt and it's sunny out, it's much easier to see the white mice on the dirt. So predators like an owl or a hawk might be able to find that mouse easier. But in the wintertime, when the climate's changed to be snowy, the white mice now are more camouflaged. They have an adaptation that helps them. And the brown mice might be eaten more by predators. All right, so you're going to click on the challenge me button, answer some questions. Over time, what will happen to the population of brown mice that live in the snowy environment compared to the population of white mice living in the same environment? So looking at this picture, assume the only difference in the two populations of the mice is the same color. So they're the same species, but they are different. They have different color fur. So over time, what's going to happen to these brown mouse? The population will stay the same. The population will increase. The population will decrease. I know you guys know this because we've talked about it before. Obviously, the population is going to decrease. If a bird was up in the sky hunting for a snack, they'd be able to see the brown mice much easier. They're probably going to be able to kill the brown mice. That means the population, all the brown mice, will go down, decrease. Yes. All right, next question. Which color mouse is more likely to survive and reproduce in the snowy environment? So which mouse is going to be better suited, more fit to survive in the snowy environment and have babies? The brown mouse, the white mouse, both, or neither? Well, if we just said the brown mouse is going to die, they can't be producing as much as they were before, so I'm going to say the white mouse. It's more likely to be able to reproduce and pass on their traits to the next generation. Whew, got that right. Suppose a few brown mice had a mutation that caused their fur to turn white in cold temperatures. Would these mice be more or less likely to survive in the environment? So mutation is kind of a maybe an interesting word, but you might have heard like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or like seen it in a video game. Mutation just means like an abnormality, or like a little bit different than normal. So if I had a nose that was this long, that would probably be a mutation. Humans don't usually have noses that are 6 inches long. So something happened in my genes that caused my body to grow that way. That's not normal, that's a mutation. So if these brown mice had a mutation that when it got cold, their fur changed colors to be white, would that help them survive or hurt them? Yeah, it'd make them more likely to survive, right? So that would be a good mutation to help them survive. Some mutations, like if they turn yellow, that might not help them at all. What is the term for traits an organism possesses that helps it survive better? Premutations, mutations, adaptations, or genetics? Remember we reviewed that at the beginning? What do you call the traits that help animals survive in their environments? Yeah, adaptations. Alright, so this next question is a discussion question. So that means you gotta be ready to tell somebody in your house about this. Or you can talk out loud like I am. My roommate thinks I'm weird, but that's okay. Suppose that this population of mice has stabilized so that both white and brown mice appear. White mice survive better in the winter, and brown mice survive better in the warmer months. If a group of these mice migrated to an area that didn't get snowy in the winter, what would be the long-term effect on the color of these mice? So let's say we know about migration. These mice left where it gets cold in the winter and goes to a desert. What would happen to the color of the population of mice, do you think? Would they stay like half white, half brown? Would brown mice have more babies so that they turn more brown? Or would more white mice have more babies and the population would turn more white? What do you guys think? So go ahead and pause the video, talk to whoever you brought along with you to talk to. When you're done, start it again. Alright, cool. Welcome back. I hope that you said something. Well, I know you all said something because you're not lazy. But what I was thinking was if they move to somewhere where it's brown all the time, the white mice are more likely to get eaten. So if they're eaten, you can't make babies when you're dead, right? So the white mice wouldn't pass their genes on to the next generation. The brown mice, some might get eaten, but most will survive because they can camouflage. The brown mice are going to pass on those traits to the next generation, and the next generation is going to be even more brown, and then those ones pass on their traits, and eventually, almost all the mice will probably be brown. That's what I thought. I hope that's maybe what you said too. I think that makes sense. All right, so there's another discussion question. A natural disaster can also play a huge role in changing of a species. How could natural disaster cause a similar change in population? So this is going to be a kind of a thinking question. A natural disaster like a flood or a drought or a forest fire, what could that do to change a population? Go ahead and pause the video, talk with your partner, whoever you chose. Alright, so we're going to do one more simulation to help us out with this. See if you guys were right. Alright, so natural disasters like forest fires can create strong selective pressure that affect how well certain members of a species can survive in an environment. Basically, that means if the environment changed, species are going to have to adapt or they might die. These disasters dramatically change the environment. It can destroy natural camouflage. Just like we did before, you're going to drag the red dot across and think about how the changing environment will affect the ability of these mice to evade predators. So it looks like a green forest, got like some sandy soil. A natural disaster like a forest fire comes and burns all the ground, burns the trees. Now which mouse will be more likely to get eaten? The brown mouse or the black mouse? Here, I hope you can see that the brown mice are more likely to survive and the black mice are more likely to get eaten by a predator. But after a natural disaster, the population can really change, just like before. The black mice are now more camouflaged, and the brown mice, are more likely to get eaten by predators. So the black mice are more likely to pass on their traits. The brown mice are not. We saw this, remember when we watched the video about the pocket mice that changed colors because of the volcano in the desert? Remember? There was the brown mouse, but then eventually, when the volcano cooled off and the rocks turned really black and dark, the mice that had darker fur eventually started being more popular because they were better adapted to survive. All right, so you can explore more. There's more questions you can answer, but that's what I wanted to show you. So let's go back to our slides. So let's think about it. Suppose the population of mice has stabilized so both white and brown mice appear. white mice survive better in winter and brown mice survive better in warm months. If a group of these mice migrated to an area that didn't get snow in the winter, what would the long-term effect be? Remember, we talked about the brown mice would be more likely to pass on. The mice fur would eventually turn to be all brown, like this mouse over here. How is this deep mouse well adapted to life in the forest? So look at this mouse. What adaptations does it have that can help it survive in the forest? Go ahead and pause your video, talk to your partner. I know that my face might be gone, but I think you can still hear me. Let's learn. So this deer mouse, whoops, not supposed to be D, it's supposed to be deer, has dark coloring that would allow it to easily hide from predators on the darkened forest floor. So it's darker, it can hide better in the trees. But on the other hand, deer mice that live in the nearby sandhills are a lighter sand-like color. What causes the deer mice to be so well adapted to their unique environments? It's called natural selection. So this mouse right here is better for the forest. This mouse right here is better for the sand. You can tell because the fur color's a little bit different. But these are the same species of mouse, just have some adaptations that are different. So we're going to watch a cool video explaining a little bit about natural selection, and then we'll keep going. So I'll make sure my volume's all the way up.
The theory of evolution was developed by Charles Darwin and published in his book On the Origin of Species. He explained that natural selection is the process behind evolution. Charles Darwin developed his theories after his adventures upon the HMS Beagle. In his travels, he observed that creatures found on the islands he visited were similar to ones found on the mainland, but appeared to be slightly different. It wasn't until he returned home that he came to the conclusion that species are specially modified to their environments, and that's why they differ. He developed 4 conditions explaining why this happens. Darwin's theory of natural selection by descent with modification is testable and observable fact. Experiments have been conducted in the wild and in labs. Let's dive deeper into Darwin's 4 conditions. Condition number 1. Individuals within a population differ.
Whoops, my bad. We talked about this before with with like giraffes that have different sized necks or mice that have different fur colors. The same species, but they are a little bit different. So that is a variation.
The theory of
we'll go back to where we
in
were.
his trap, he developed 4 conditions explained in the wild and in lab.
Thanks for being patient.
Condition number 1. Individuals within a population differ. There are features that differ within populations of the same animal. In our case, the feature that varies between our giraffes is neck length.
So these giraffes are same species, but have a variation, a difference.
Giraffes were born with long necks. Some were born with short necks. Condition number 2. The differences are, at least in part, passed from parents to offspring.
Inherited traits. Passing on parents' traits to their babies.
Darwin's descent with modification is the idea that offspring are fairly similar to their parents with some genetic differences. Condition number 3. Some individuals are more successful at surviving and reproducing than others. In the case of our giraffes, the long neck individual did not acquire its neck by stretching to grab the leaves. Instead, individuals within the population were born with a neck length that was longer than others. Because the longer neck allowed them to reach the food that was otherwise unattainable, it gave them an advantage.
So we say that this giraffe is more fit for its environment because it can actually get food. So the giraffes that had the longer necks were more likely to survive and pass their traits on. This poor little giraffe might not have been able to get as much food. It might have been weaker, like gotten eaten by a lion, or it might have even died of starvation. Really sad. But that's natural selection.
Condition number 4. The successful individuals succeed because of variant traits they have inherited and will pass on to their offspring. Giraffes with the longer neck advantage are in better health and able to pass this feature to their offspring. Because this trait is more successful than shorter necks, more individuals in the population have it.
So remember, we've talked about traits like skin color or facial shape, hairlines. So traits are passed from parents to offspring. So the giraffes' long necks pass their traits to their babies, and their babies grew long necks and were more likely to survive.
Time, this process can result in populations that specialize for particular environments and may eventually result in emergence of new species. In other words, natural selection is an important process, though not the only process, by which evolution takes place within a population of organisms. Let's review.
All right, so real quick, let's go over some key vocabulary. I hope you saw in the video that some animals are better to survive in certain environments than others. This is due to variation. When we talk about variation, it's a word you might be familiar with from class. It means that organisms of the same species have some differences. In the video, we saw giraffes with neck variations. Some had short necks and others had long. So same species, but they are different. This one has a short neck, medium neck, long neck. So they're all giraffes, but they have some variations. Humans have variations too. We look different. We're different heights. We have different sized feet. All these things are differences or variations, but we're the same species. Another important word that we need to talk about is reproduction. That means to have babies or offspring. Think back to our first experiment we did way back in August with the goldfish, and having more of the goldfish die than reproduce caused our game to end pretty fast. Maybe you remember that. During reproduction, parents pass their traits to their babies. So here's a grandfather and a grandmother. They married, had babies. You can see some of the same traits, like the same face shape, maybe some same skin color. They also had a son who's maybe looks more like the grandfather, maybe not. But again, you can see like very similar skin color, face shape, and then they pass some of those traits on to their babies. So married, had some babies. Reproduction just means to have babies and pass on some traits. So traits got passed from one generation to the next. These might grow up and have babies, and they will pass their traits on. Last keyword, tying it all together, is natural selection. Natural selection is the idea that some members of a species have better traits to survive in certain environments. The member of the species that has the better traits reproduce and pass those better traits to the next generation. The species with the worst traits die and do not reproduce. So in this picture, you can see that there's same species but with some variation, some different colors. This bird is eating the gray moth because the white moths are more camouflaged. Over time, the species that lives by the white trees are all going to turn white through natural selection because the white moths are going to be able to survive and have babies, and their babies are going to be, white because that's what their traits are. The black moths, they might have some babies because some might survive, but most of them are going to get eaten because they're easy to be spotted. But remember, we've talked about if the environment changed, then all of a sudden the better traits change. So now all of a sudden being dark in this environment helps the moth instead of hurts it. So there's not one trait that's always better than the next. It just depends on the environment. But over time, the populations can change. So imagine that humans evolved in a world where we had to climb trees, make tools, and eat bugs. What adaptations might we have? So draw a picture. So I need you to pause the video and think about this. What if we lived in a world where to get our food, we actually had to climb trees and eat bugs? What adaptations might we have? How would he have changed over time? Draw a picture. Once you're done, hit play. So what I thought of was, well, we might have longer arms to reach branches that are higher off the ground. We also might have monkeys use their tails to balance on when they're swinging through trees. We might have developed tails. Our stomachs might be a little bit different so that we can eat bugs. We might have needed to get different tongues that can go deeper into holes. I don't know. It's interesting to think about. But those traits that might have helped us survive might be what we had turned into. All right, so real quick, this is something that's really interesting. It's going to take like 5 minutes, but I think it's worth it. So how did natural selection impact our skin colors, human skin colors? You might have noticed that there's lots of different colors of skin. How did natural selection cause skin color to change? So here's a video about it, and then we're going to discuss kind of how it happened in a second.
When ultraviolet sunlight hits our skin, it affects each of us a little differently. Depending on skin color, it'll take only minutes of exposure to turn one person beetroot pink, while another requires hours to experience the slightest change. So what's to account?
You might have seen that before. Remember when I would come in really pink because of a sunburn, whereas you guys might not even feel a sunburn because your skin is much darker. But what is that? Why?
Account for that difference, and how did our skin come to take on so many different hues to begin with? Whatever the color, our skin tells an epic tale of human intrepidness and adaptability, revealing its variance to be a function of biology. It all centers around melanin, the pigment that gives skin and hair its color. This ingredient comes from skin cells called melanocytes and takes two basic forms. There's eumelanin, which gives rise to a range of brown skin tones as well as black, brown, and blonde hair, and pheomelanin, which causes the reddish browns of freckles and red hair. But humans weren't always like this. Our varying skin tones were formed by an evolutionary process driven by the sun. It began some 50,000 years ago when our ancestors migrated north from Africa and into Europe and Asia. These ancient humans lived between the equator and the Tropic of Capricorn, a region saturated by the sun's UV-carrying rays. When skin is exposed to UV for long periods of time, the UV light damages the DNA within our cells, and skin starts to burn. If that damage is severe enough, the cell's mutations can lead to melanoma, a deadly cancer that forms in the skin's melanocytes.
So the sun is giving off energy, and that energy can actually cause, if you get too much of it, skin cells to mutate, become abnormal, a little bit different, and cause cancer. Interesting. Keep watching.
Sunscreen as we know it today didn't exist 50,000 years ago. So how did our ancestors cope with this onslaught of UV? The key to survival lay in their own personal sunscreen, manufactured beneath the skin, melanin. The type and amount of melanin in your skin determines whether you'll be more or less protected from the sun. This comes down to the skin's response as sunlight strikes it. When it's exposed to UV light, that triggers special light-sensitive receptors called rhodopsin, which stimulate the production of melanin to shield cells from damage. For light-skinned people, that extra melanin darkens their skin.
So if you're lighter skin, you might see people's skin getting a little bit darker in the sun. That's because their body's making more melanin to protect them.
And produces a tan. Over the course of generations, humans living at the sun-saturated latitudes in Africa adapted to have a higher melanin production threshold and more eumelanin, giving skin a darker tone.
So because they needed to be protected from the sun, their skin actually became darker. Of course, the people with the darker skin could survive and pass on their darker skin to their babies, where the people with the lighter skin, by where it gets lots of sun, might have gotten cancer and died earlier. It actually caused the skin color to become darker. Interesting.
This built-in sun shield helped protect them from melanoma, likely making them evolutionarily fitter and capable of passing this useful trait on to new generations. But soon, some of our sun-adapted ancestors migrated northward out of the tropical zone, spreading far and wide across the Earth. The further north they traveled, the less direct sunshine they saw. This was a problem, because although UV light can damage skin, it also has an important parallel benefit. UV helps our bodies produce vitamin D, an ingredient that strengthens bones and lets us absorb vital minerals like calcium, iron, magnesium,
So sunlight helps our bodies actually make an important vitamin that we need. Interesting.
phosphate, and zinc. Without it, humans experience serious fatigue and weakened bones that can cause a condition known as rickets. For humans whose dark skin effectively blocked whatever sunlight there was, vitamin D deficiency would have posed a serious threat in the north. But some of them happened to produce less melanin. They were exposed to small enough amounts of light that melanoma was less likely, and their lighter skin better absorbed the UV light. So they benefited from vitamin D, developed strong bones, and survived well enough to produce healthy offspring. Over many generations of selection, skin color in those regions gradually lightened. As a result of our ancestors' adaptability, today the planet is full of people with a vast palette of skin colors.
So real quick, when there was less sunlight, our bodies didn't need all that melanin to protect us from the sun. We actually needed lighter skin so we could absorb sunlight to help our bodies strengthen our bones, make vitamin D. So over generations, when it was more north or really far south and there's less sunlight, it was actually a better adaptation to have lighter skin. So over the course of time, people with darker skin would not be able to have strong bones. They might not be able to work, find food. They would die off. And the people with lighter skin passed on their traits. So as humans have changed position on the earth, changed their environments, their bodies have changed to produce different skin colors. So if you're by where there's lots of sunlight, it's better to have darker skin. If you're where there's less sunlight, it's better to have lighter skin. Obviously now we've learned more about this and now can make vitamins to help people that need vitamin D, or sunscreen to help people with lighter skin. So now people all over the earth have different skin colors. So a light-skinned person like me could move to towards the equator and just wear lots of sunscreen and would probably be safe. And a darker-skinned person could move somewhere north like Alaska and would be able to be fine as long as they took vitamin D pills. So, but over time, that's kind of how our skin colors came to be. Really interesting. Whoops. No. So darker skin has more pigment, which is a natural sunscreen. So people who lived in the sunny environments needed darker skin to protect them from harmful UV rays. So if you lived in Africa or near the equator, like where Brazil or other South American countries are, it is better to have darker skin so that the sunlight wouldn't give you cancer. But as people began to migrate, move to different locations, like where there's less sunlight, they needed to develop more vitamin D. Sunlight helps our bodies make vitamin D. So in places when there is not much direct sunlight, our bodies need less pigment in order to get as much vitamin D as possible. So again, our bodies adapted through natural selection to change our skin color. Really important things that it's interesting. Like lots of people are different skin colors, and that is because of where their ancestors came from. Super interesting. In your exit ticket, it's only one question because it's been a long lesson. In your own words, explain natural selection. So you can watch back to that part of the video where we talked about that. You can use the example of skin color, but talk about what is natural selection. I want like 3 or 4 sentences, maybe give an example. Remember, you're almost 6th graders, so for sure you can write down 3 or 4 sentences. I hope that this was helpful. I hope you learned some stuff. I miss you guys. I will hopefully see some of you at the drive-thru graduation. I also want you to make sure you take your quick check on Fridays. The link should be on the website or your teacher has sent it to you. The more people that take it lets us know the more people are doing their work. As always, reach out if you have any questions. Bye.